One of the historic examples of suppressing facts was the reporting and non-reporting of the Soviet Union's government-created famine in the Ukraine and the North Caucasus that killed millions of people in the 1930s. This is going far back, right? New York Times Moscow correspondent Walter Duranty wrote, "There is no famine or actual starvation, nor is there likely to be." He received a Pulitzer Prize. The Pulitzer panel commending him for his reports, quote, marked by scholarship, profundity, impartiality, sound judgment, and exceptional clarity. Meanwhile, British writer Malcolm Muggeridge reported from the Ukraine that peasants there were in fact starving. Quote, I mean starving in its absolute sense, not undernourished as, for instance, most Oriental peasants and some unemployed workers in Europe, but having had for weeks next to nothing to eat, end quote. Muggeridge, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, wrote in a subsequent article that the man-made famine was, quote, one of the most monstrous crimes in history, so terrible that people in the future will scarcely be able to believe it ever happened, end quote. Decades later, a scholarly study by Robert Conquest, The Harvest of Sorrow, estimated that 6 million people had died in that famine over a period of 3 years. Still later, when the official archives were finally opened in the last days of the Soviet Union under Mikhail Gorbachev, new estimates of the deaths from the man-made famine were made by various scholars who had studied material from those archives. Most of their estimates equaled or exceeded Dr. Conquest's earlier estimates. At the time of the famine, however, this was one of the most successful filtering operations imaginable. What Muggeridge said was dismissed as, quote, a hysterical tirade by Beatrice Webb, co-author with her husband Sidney Webb of an internationally known study of the Soviet Union. Muggeridge was vilified, was unable to get work as a writer after his dispatches from the Soviet Union, and was so financially strapped that he, his wife, and 2 small children had to move in with friends. There is no need to believe that there was any conspiracy among editors or journalists to silence and ostracize Malcolm Muggeridge, nor is a conspiracy necessary for successfully filtering out things that do not fit the prevailing vision, either then or now. Except for Muggeridge and a very few other people, a famine deliberately used to break the back of resistance to Stalin, killing a comparable or larger number of people as those who died in the Nazi Holocaust, would have been filtered completely out of history instead of being merely ignored as it usually is today. This was not a matter of honest mistakes by Duranty and others. What Duranty said privately to some other journalists and to diplomats at the time was radically different from what he said in his dispatches to the New York Times. For example, in 1933, a British diplomat reported to London, quote, Mr. Duranty thinks it is quite possible that as many as 10 million people may have died directly or indirectly from lack of food in the Soviet Union during the past year. So when people wonder why it's important that we know what, for instance, Anthony Fauci was saying privately early in COVID, this is why.
This is why, and it also reveals the complexity of the corruption of such systems. And right. Sol is absolutely right. This does not require a conspiracy. What it requires is a system of incentives that results in the story being obscured, right? The journalist who reports it finds themselves unable to get work. The journalist who obscures it finds themselves in possession of a Pulitzer Prize. Actually, they should call it a Pulitzer Prize since he got...
That's been done.
It's been done. Oh, well, all right. I feel derivative.
Well, you didn't know it'd been done.
No, I didn't. But anyway, this actually is a terrific moment to point then to Jacob Siegel's new excellent article in Tablet Magazine on this very topic. So what he has done is an exploration.
Do we have, I have not seen
this
article.
You have Jacob Siegel's Tablet article? Jacob Siegel is a senior editor at Tablet Magazine.
You ready?
Yep. And here is his new article, maybe a tour de force.
That's an alarming image.
That is an alarming.
For those of you who are just listening, it's an oil or something of a crow with a digital eye. Like
digital eye. Yep. And the title of the article is A Guide to Understanding the Hoax of the Century. Anyway, it is excellent. It's quite a long article. We will post a link to it. And what it does is it explores the new architecture for managing narratives, ostensibly in the national interest. But of course, that's not how it works, is it?
No,
this is a nation structure that has been captured by special interests, which means interests that are counter to the public's interest, that is foisting a narrative on us that has all sorts of ramifications, be they medical, fiscal, international relations, environmental. And so anyway, what you and I have been talking about, in terms of, for example, misdis and malinformation, is discussed here. The article does cover the shenanigans over COVID, one amongst many topics. He's got 13 different perspectives that he describes. Anyway, highly recommend it. It's definitely worth the investment of time. I also discovered this morning that there is a glossary that Tablet Magazine, I hope they are just building it. It's not complete as it is, but they appear to be building a glossary of terms relevant to information control. I, of course, furiously contacted them this morning and said, you need misdis and malinformation, and you need to trace it back to the Department of Homeland Security that introduced this in their memo in February of 2022.
That's right.
But anyway, follows perfectly from Thomas Sowell's words.
Indeed it does.